Good morning. For our devotion today, let's turn to Psalm 18. Psalm 18 is written by David, explaining to us his experience and how God delivered him from his trouble, especially Saul. David writes the psalm when he is old, and a record of it can be found in 2 Samuel 22. Encourage you to read 2 Samuel 22 sometime today. David starts the psalm with praise. He praises God for who he is, and he praises God for delivering him and saving him from his troubles. Let's break down this psalm, shall we? Verse 1 to 3, David writes, "You are my rock, you are my fortress, my salvation, my strength." We'll come back to these words a little later, so keep that in your mind. In verse 4, David explains how God is his rock and why he says, "You are my rock." It's interesting, the psalmist chooses to explain to you and I his surrounding, his circumstances, the darkness that surrounded him. He faced death, he faced sorrow, fear, stress, discouragement. You say, David, a man after God's own heart? Yes. And David writes this down so that he can explain to you and me how human he was. And as human beings, it doesn't matter your title, it doesn't matter your status, it doesn't matter. Because when you and I face challenges and difficulties, God is with us. We need God, especially in our times of discouragement. In verse 4 and 5, David goes further to explain his condition. David writes, "I am surrounded by death and despair." And maybe this morning you are here and you've gone through this challenge where you feel like you're surrounded by despair, you're surrounded by death. No one cares for you. God cares for you, my friend, this morning. In your sickness, in your crisis, in your financial crisis, or whatever crisis you are going through, God is promised to be with you. Isaiah 43 verse 10 says, "He will never leave you nor forsake you. He is with you in your time of trouble." I'm glad David doesn't even explain his condition, hopelessness and despair, but David gives you and I a response that you and I can make. David doesn't stop at just explaining his pity party and say, "Oh, I'm so sad," and he grumbles or he complains. But David goes a step further and he writes in verse 6, he says, "I prayed to God, I cried out to God for help, and he answered me." Sometimes you and I feel like our prayers are hitting the roof. It doesn't go anywhere. But let me challenge you this morning. God hears you and he is answering your prayer. Now coming back to verse 2, David writes, "You are my rock, my salvation, my strength, my savior." What does it mean this morning? It means that no matter what you and I face, no matter what you and I go through, God knows you by name. He is your rock. He is your salvation. And I want you to put your name there. God is Agnel's rock. God is Agnel's fortress. God is Agnel's salvation. Put your name there this morning. I'm not sure what you're going through, but God is your rock and your fortress and your strength. So what lesson do you and I learn this morning from Psalm 18? And from David is this: you and I are human beings, and our titles don't matter, our status doesn't matter. When we face challenges, instead of grumbling and complaining and murmuring and getting upset or sad, we can stand on God's promises. We can come to God and know that He hears our prayer. So let's cry out to God for help, because this God of help is here to help you and help me. He is your rock, He is your fortress, and He is your strength. God bless you.